On Sunday, March 15th, day 16 of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump gave an interview to the Financial Times. He was asked about the Strait of Hormuz, about the naval coalition he had been appealing for, about China. And he said something that landed in financial markets, in Beijing, in Brussels, and in every capital that watches the relationship between the world's two largest economies. I think China should help too, because China gets 90% of its oil from the straits, Trump told the Financial Times. He then added, waiting until the summit would be too late. That summit is the planned late March meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing, a meeting that U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng were actively working to prepare. Their talks in Paris had just wrapped up on Sunday, and Trump told the Financial Times he may delay it. We may delay, he said. Delay the Xi summit over the Strait of Hormuz, over China's oil supply, over whether Beijing sends minesweepers and drone countermeasure vessels to a waterway that American and Israeli military operations have effectively closed. And then Trump turned to NATO. If there's no response, or if it's a negative response, I think it will be very bad for the future of NATO, he told the Financial Times. Very bad for the future of NATO. If European allies do not help the United States police a strait that U.S. and Israeli forces helped close in the first place. And then Trump added one more statement about the country he just called his number one ally. He criticized the United Kingdom specifically. The UK might be considered the number one ally, Trump told the Financial Times. And when I asked for them to come, they didn't want to come. He said Britain only offered to send ships after the U.S. had already reduced Iran's military capabilities. Number one ally. Didn't want to come. That is what Trump said about the United Kingdom in a Financial Times interview on day 16. These are not off-the-cuff remarks at a press conference. This is a prepared interview with one of the world's most read financial newspapers. These are the deliberate positions of the American president on the future of NATO, the upcoming Xi summit, and the alliance with the United Kingdom. On day 16 of a war that has driven Brent crude above $100 per barrel, sent Goldman Sachs raising its inflation forecast, and produced a global energy crisis that Trump is now asking China to help solve. Let's go through exactly what was said, what it means, and what the markets and the diplomatic landscape look like as a result. Let's start with the China dimension. Because the Trump-Xi relationship is the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world economy, and Trump just put the Strait of Hormuz inside it. The planned late March summit between Trump and Xi was being prepared in Paris on the same weekend Trump gave this interview. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng were wrapping up the first of 2 days of talks in Paris on Sunday, according to Reuters, as cited by Market Screener. The purpose of those Paris talks, to iron out kinks in the U.S.-China trade truce and clear a path for Trump's Beijing trip. A trade truce. The two countries had reached a managed trade arrangement. Bessent and He Lifeng were in Paris specifically to maintain it, to clear a path for the summit. And at the same moment those talks were happening in Paris, Trump was telling the Financial Times that he might delay the summit if China does not help with the Strait of Hormuz. 2 tracks, running simultaneously. Bessent and He Lifeng in Paris, building toward the summit. Trump telling the FT the summit may not happen as planned. That is not a coordinated diplomatic message. That is the president publicly inserting a new condition into a summit that his own Treasury Secretary was in Paris to prepare. And the specific condition Trump set is worth examining precisely. He wants China to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He told the FT that China gets 90% of its oil from the straits. He said this means China has an obligation to help police the waterway. It's only appropriate that people who are the beneficiaries of the strait will help to make sure that nothing bad happens there, Trump told the FT. There is something remarkable about that framing. The Strait of Hormuz was, until February 28th, a commercially functional global shipping lane. The military operation that created the current crisis, Operation Epic Fury, was launched by the United States and Israel. Iran's restriction of the strait is a documented response to that operation, and Trump is now asking the beneficiaries of the strait's normal functionality to help reopen it. He is asking China, whose oil supply flows through the strait, to send warships to a crisis that U.S. and Israeli military operations triggered. From China's perspective, that framing requires some examination. China purchases oil from Iran. Iran is a significant Chinese energy supplier. China has publicly called for a ceasefire throughout this conflict. China's foreign ministry has not, in the reporting reviewed, committed to sending warships to a U.S.-led naval coalition in the Persian Gulf. And Trump is saying, help reopen the strait that your oil flows through, or the summit gets delayed. That is a form of economic leverage applied to a geopolitical crisis that China has not endorsed. Let's talk about what Trump specifically asked for when the Financial Times pressed him on what kind of help he wanted. He gave a precise answer: minesweepers, and other military assets to counter drones and naval mines. Minesweepers, not combat ships, not naval escorts in the traditional sense. Mine countermeasure vessels, that is a specific and technically significant request. It tells you something about what the U.S. military believes Iran has placed or is placing in the Strait of Hormuz. Naval mines are a specific Iranian capability. Iran has threatened to use mines in the strait during past confrontations. A minesweeper request is a signal that the U.S. military is concerned about Iranian mines as part of the enforcement mechanism for the strait closure. Not just missiles and drones, mines, laid in the water, that disable or sink ships trying to transit. If Iran has been deploying mines in the strait, that changes the risk calculus for any ship attempting transit, even with a naval escort. An escort can shoot down a drone. An escort can intercept a ballistic missile. An escort cannot always see a contact mine on the seabed. You need minesweepers for that. And Trump is asking China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the UK for minesweepers, among the most specialized naval vessels in any country's fleet. Let's talk about the NATO dimension of Trump's FT interview, because his statement about NATO's future is not a casual complaint. It is a warning about the long-term architecture of Western collective defense. If there's no response, or if it's a negative response, I think it will be very bad for the future of NATO, Trump told the Financial Times. NATO was founded on Article 5, the collective defense principle that an attack on one member is an attack on all. That principle has never been formally triggered over the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian military has not attacked NATO member territory in a way that would constitute an Article 5 invocation, with the exception of the NATO intercepts of Iranian missiles heading toward Turkey. 3 of them as of day 16. Trump is not invoking Article 5. He is asking NATO members to join a naval coalition to reopen a shipping lane. And he is threatening that their refusal will have consequences for NATO's future. That is a remarkable leverage point. The U.S. provides the security umbrella under which European and NATO members have operated for 80 years. American nuclear guarantees, American forward deployed forces, American intelligence sharing. Trump is signaling that European inaction on the Strait of Hormuz will be remembered when the terms of that umbrella are being discussed. Very bad for the future of NATO. Those 5 words will be parsed in every European capital's foreign ministry, in Berlin, in Paris, in Warsaw, in Rome, in every country whose security architecture depends on American commitment to collective defense. And they come one day after Trump called the UK's response inadequate. When I asked for them to come, they didn't want to come. The UK is, by virtually every metric, the United States' closest military ally. Five Eyes intelligence sharing, nuclear weapons cooperation, Trident submarine program, Iraq, Afghanistan, side by side. And Trump told the Financial Times that when he asked them to come, they didn't come. The UK Ministry of Defense said it is currently discussing with our allies and partners a range of options, according to CNN's Day 16 reporting. Discussing options. Trump heard that as they didn't want to come. Now, let's look at what the financial markets were doing on Day 16, because the market screener data in the documents gives a specific real-time snapshot. WTI crude oil was trading at $97.76 per barrel, down approximately 1% on the day. Brent crude at $102.80 per barrel, also down approximately 1%. Oil slipping slightly on the day that Trump threatened to delay the G summit and warned NATO. Why would oil prices fall on a day with this kind of geopolitical escalation? Because Trump's statements about the strait contain both the threat and the implicit promise. If China helps, if NATO sends ships, if the coalition materializes, the strait reopens. Markets trade on expectations. The expectation that a naval coalition could form, even if no country had firmly committed as of the reporting, was enough to pull oil slightly off its peak. But let's put those numbers in their full context. WTI at $97.76 per barrel. Before February 28th, WTI was trading at approximately $55 per barrel, according to the baseline implied in earlier reporting. The 23% gas price increase that AOA confirmed represents the consumer-level impact of an oil price that has roughly doubled since this war began. Slightly off the $119 peak from earlier in the week. Still almost double the pre-war price. The modest 1% daily decline reflects market hope, not market resolution. And Investing.com's reporting on Day 16 cited Goldman Sachs specifically. Goldman Sachs said the oil price spike may trim global GDP by 0.3% and push inflation higher. Goldman's projection, the oil spike alone, separate from any other economic factors, shaves global economic output. 0.3% of global GDP. Global GDP is approximately $110 trillion. 0.3% is approximately $330 billion in lost global economic output from an oil spike, from a war, that the president is now asking China and NATO to help him clean up. Let's talk about what the US-China trade truce context means for Trump's Hormuz demand, because Besant and He Lifeng were in Paris to maintain the trade truce. That truce was hard won. It reduced tariffs on both sides. It created a managed trade framework. It was clearing the path for the Xi summit. By inserting Hormuz into the summit calculus, Trump is effectively telling China, the trade truce that Besant is maintaining in Paris may not lead to the summit I threatened you with unless you send minesweepers to the Gulf. That is not how managed diplomatic processes are supposed to work, and China knows it. Iran is a significant Chinese oil supplier. China has economic and strategic interests in maintaining a working relationship with Tehran. Sending Chinese naval vessels to a US-led coalition in the Persian Gulf to police a strait that was closed because of a US-Israeli military operation puts China in a position of appearing to endorse the operation. China has publicly called for a ceasefire. China sending minesweepers to help the US reopen a strait that US operations closed would contradict China's stated diplomatic position. That is the bind Trump has placed Beijing in. Help us undo the disruption our operation created, or the summit gets delayed, and China has its own leverage. Trump told the FT that Iran is a major supplier of oil to China. China could, at least theoretically, facilitate negotiations between Iran and the US through back channels. China has been in contact with Iranian leadership throughout this conflict. China's foreign minister has called for a ceasefire. The Yuan-denominated oil trade that Iran proposed as a condition for reopening the strait, reported by CNN earlier in the week, is directly aligned with Chinese long-term interest in internationalizing the yuan. China is not a passive bystander to this crisis. It has economic interests in Iran. It has strategic interests in not being seen as a U.S. coalition partner in the Gulf. And Trump is asking it to send minesweepers, or lose the summit. Let's look at the specific language Trump used about Iran's current capabilities, as reported in the Financial Times interview. We're hitting them very hard, Trump said. They've got nothing left but to make a little trouble in the strait. Nothing left but to make a little trouble. On day 16 of this war, Iran had launched 7 missile salvos at Israel, according to CNN's Day 16 reporting. Attacked Gulf states with drones and missiles, with Bahrain sirens activating and Qatar intercepting an incoming missile. Struck the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad with 2 drones on day 15. Attacked an oil facility at Fujairah, disrupting operations. Warned UAE civilians to evacuate areas around Jebel Ali, Khalifa Port, and Mina al-Fujairah. Issued a threat to burn every American-linked energy facility in the Gulf if Kharg Island's oil infrastructure is struck. That is what making a little trouble in the strait looks like on day 16. 7 missile salvos at Israel. Drone strikes on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Disrupted operations at a major UAE oil port. A standing threat to burn Gulf energy infrastructure. Trump's framing, little trouble, is his consistent characterization of Iranian capabilities as minimal. And Iran continues to demonstrate capabilities that produce real-world consequences across multiple countries simultaneously. Both things are part of the public record. Both deserve to be documented. Now let's look at what Trump said about Kharg Island in this specific FT interview, because it goes beyond just for fun. We can hit that in 5 minutes, Trump told the Financial Times about Kharg Island's oil infrastructure, and there's not a thing they can do about it. 5 minutes. Not a thing they can do about it. He's describing a strike on Iran's primary oil export hub as a trivially executable option. 5 minutes. That statement tells you something about the U.S. military's confidence in its ability to reach and strike Kharg. It also tells you something about where Trump's mind is on the question of whether to use that option. He has not used it yet. He spared it for reasons of decency. He said he might hit it a few more times, just for fun. And now he is saying it takes 5 minutes and there is nothing Iran can do to stop it. Each of those statements has been a progression. Decency kept the oil infrastructure safe. Fun made the next strike sound casual. 5 minutes made it sound effortless. The direction of those 3 statements is a deliberate signaling pattern. Whether it is a genuine threat, a negotiating posture, or psychological pressure is something analysts in Tehran are working out right now. But the progression is documented, and it is real. Let's bring in the economic data that investing.com cited on day 16 because it grounds the geopolitical stakes in numbers. Goldman Sachs said the oil spike may trim global GDP by 0.3% and push inflation higher, according to investing.com. $100 oil has what investing.com described as a dual-edged sword effect on domestic U.S. growth. The United States is the world's largest oil producer. When oil prices rise, American oil companies make more money. That is the upside edge. Trump noted this in his Truth Social post earlier in the week. And the United States is the largest oil producer in the world by far. So when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. But oil at $100 also means consumers pay more. Gas at $3.68 per gallon nationally. Diesel at $4.85 per gallon. Trucking costs higher. Food prices higher. Manufacturing input costs higher. Heating and cooling costs higher. The American economy produces oil and consumes it. Higher prices help American oil producers and hurt everyone else. The net effect on GDP, according to Goldman Sachs, is negative, even for the world's largest oil producer. Even with American oil companies profiting from the price spike, 0.3% of global GDP trimmed, $330 billion in lost global economic output. From the oil price alone, not from the direct cost of the war, not from the $11.3 billion in the first 6 days, not from the interceptors being replaced, not from the emergency procurement approved at midnight, just from the oil price. Now let's put Trump's FT interview in the context of everything else that was happening on day 16. Because the interview exists within a simultaneous military reality. The Israeli military told CNN it is planning at least 3 more weeks of operations with thousands of targets remaining. The IDF hit more than 200 targets in western and central Iran on day 16 alone. 7 more Iranian missile salvos against Israel. Iran warned civilians to evacuate UAE ports. The Oscar ceremony required 1,000 law enforcement personnel due to a reported Iranian drone threat to California. Formula One canceled 2 April races. Trump told the Financial Times he may delay the Xi summit. He warned NATO of a very bad future. He criticized the UK. He said he could hit Kharg Island in 5 minutes. All of that is day 16, and it sits on top of a market reality documented in the market screener data. S&P 500 at 6,632, down 0.61% on the day. Dow Jones at 46,8, down 26%. Nasdaq at 22,105, down 0.93%. Meta down 3.3%. Broadcom down 4.11%. Adobe down 7.58%. The technology sector, which does not have direct oil exposure, is down sharply because technology companies operate in a global economy, and a global economy with $100 oil, Goldman Sachs trimming GDP forecasts, inflation running above the Fed's target, and the Federal Reserve holding rates until September is not a growth environment for technology stocks. The war is in the Middle East. The financial consequences are on every stock exchange in the world. Dollar index at 100, gold at $5,016 per ounce, gold above $5,000. When gold crosses $5,000, it is telling you something about where investors think this ends up. Gold is the asset people buy when they are uncertain about everything else. 5 is $16 per ounce. On day 16 of a war whose end Trump says he will feel in his bones. Let's look at what the phrase very bad for the future of NATO actually implies, because it is worth unpacking precisely. NATO has been the foundation of European security since 1949. It is built on collective defense, intelligence sharing, interoperability standards, and the American nuclear umbrella. All of those things are valuable to European members. All of them are, in Trump's framing, contingent on European behavior, not just treaty obligations. Behavior that Trump judges as sufficient. Trump has challenged NATO burden sharing before. He has threatened to not defend members who don't pay enough. He has called NATO obsolete. He has demanded European defense spending increases. All of those are part of the documented record of his relationship with the alliance. This is different. This is not about spending percentages. This is about a specific operational request. Send ships and minesweepers to the Strait of Hormuz, tied directly to the future viability of the alliance. If the European members do not help, it will be very bad for the future of NATO. That is a conditional. European leaders are hearing that conditional clearly, and the calculus they face is specific. Sending naval assets to the Strait of Hormuz means joining a coalition that is operating in the aftermath of a U.S.-Israeli war. It means appearing to endorse the military operation that created the crisis. It means potentially exposing their ships to Iranian retaliation. It means domestic political costs in countries where the war is unpopular. Spain said no to basing operations. France said it would take several weeks to organize a coalition. Germany has stayed out of combat operations. The UK is discussing options. And Trump is saying this is very bad for the future of NATO. Every European government is weighing those two things simultaneously. Let's close with the full picture of what Trump's Financial Times interview means for the direction of this conflict. The interview produced 3 specific diplomatic developments that will shape the next days and weeks. First, the Xi summit is now conditional on Chinese behavior regarding the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Treasury Secretary is in Paris, building toward the summit. Trump told the FT he may delay it. Beijing has to decide whether to send minesweepers to the Gulf or watch the summit get delayed. That decision has strategic consequences for the U.S.-China relationship that extend far beyond the strait. Second, NATO members have been told their alliance has a very bad future if they don't help. European capitals have to decide whether that warning represents a genuine Trump posture or a negotiating signal. The UK has already been criticized by name France is taking weeks to organize something. Germany has stayed out. None of them want to be seen as the country that let NATO's future turn bad. Third, Iran has been told again that Kharg Island's oil infrastructure can be destroyed in 5 minutes. Iran is calibrating whether that is a genuine near-term threat or pressure tactic. Iran's armed forces have already said every American-linked energy facility burns if it happens. All three developments emerged from a single Financial Times interview. On day 16 of a war, the president says he has won and has to finish, while planning 3 more weeks of operations. While $826 million in emergency defense procurement was approved at midnight the night before, while gold is above $5,000, while WTI crude is at $97.76, while Brent is at $102.80, while gas is up 23% at the pump, while diesel is $1 more per gallon, while 17 vessels have been attacked in 2 weeks, while the world's 4 largest container shipping companies have diverted away, while India, France, and Italy are calling Tehran directly, while 13 Americans are dead, while 140 more are wounded, while more than 3,000 people have died across the region. And Trump told the Financial Times China gets 90% of its oil from the straits, and they must help. And if NATO doesn't respond, it will be very bad for the future of NATO. And we can hit Kharg Island in 5 minutes, and there's not a thing they can do about it. Day 16, the summit may be delayed. The alliance has a warning. The island has a 5-minute clock on it. And the war that was pretty much over on day 11 is now planning 3 more weeks, at minimum. Let's go deeper on why the China ask is the most geopolitically significant thing in this interview. Because Trump asking China to send minesweepers to the Strait of Hormuz is not just a logistical request, it is a request for China to take a side, publicly, operationally, in a conflict that China has been publicly neutral on, calling for a ceasefire, not endorsing the U.S.-Israeli operation, maintaining its economic relationship with Iran. If China sends minesweepers to a U.S.-led naval coalition in the Persian Gulf, it is no longer neutral. It is a participant in the enforcement mechanism of the Strait of Hormuz, alongside the country that has been bombing Iran for 16 days, alongside Israel, in a region where China has cultivated relationships with Arab states, with Iran, with the entire arc of countries that depend on those energy flows. China's neutrality in this conflict has been an asset. It allows Beijing to continue purchasing Iranian oil, to maintain the trade relationship that Russian and Iranian sanctions have deepened, to position itself as a responsible global actor, advocating diplomacy while Washington and Tel Aviv prosecute the war. If China joins the naval coalition, it surrenders that neutrality. And Iran has already told CNN it is considering allowing tankers through the strait if oil is traded in Chinese yuan. That yuan condition is not a random demand. Iran is offering China something specific, a structural role in the global oil trade, oil transactions in Chinese yuan paid to Iran, through a framework that would give China's currency greater international standing. And Trump is simultaneously asking China to join his coalition. China is being offered 2 entirely different futures by 2 different sides. From the US, join the naval coalition, send minesweepers, help us reopen the strait, and keep the trade truce and the summit. From Iran, take our oil in yuan, gain structural power in the global energy trade, and we will let your tankers through while we keep everyone else out. China has not publicly accepted either offer. But the tension between them is the most consequential geopolitical negotiation in the world right now, and it is happening in the context of a war that has driven gold above $5,000 per ounce. Let's talk about what minesweepers specifically signals about the state of the strait. Because Trump did not ask for generic naval assets. He specified minesweepers and other military assets to counter drones and naval mines. 2 categories, drones and mines. The drone threat has been visible and confirmed throughout this conflict. Iran has launched hundreds of drones at Gulf states, at American bases, at commercial shipping. Drone countermeasure technology, the kind Ukraine has developed against Russian Shaheds, is the most relevant emerging capability for that threat. Naval mines are different. Naval mines are passive weapons. You lay them in the water, they wait. Ships that pass over them trigger detonation. They are extremely difficult to detect and remove. The cost ratio is devastating. A naval mine costs thousands of dollars. The ship it disables costs hundreds of millions. The cargo it sinks may be irreplaceable. Iran has been developing and stockpiling naval mines for decades. During the 1980s tanker war, when Iran and Iraq both attacked commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf, Iranian mines damaged multiple vessels and created exactly the kind of crisis that now threatens to repeat. The USS Samuel B. Roberts frigate was nearly sunk by an Iranian mine in 1988. That mine damaged 260 feet of the ship's keel. If Iran has been laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz over the past 16 days, the risk to any vessel attempting to transit is not just drones and missiles from the surface. It is mines on the seabed, which you cannot shoot down, which you cannot intercept, which you can only sweep. Trump asked for minesweepers. That request is a window into the U.S. military's current intelligence assessment of what is in the water in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, let's look at what the UK's response reveals about the state of the Anglo-American special relationship. Because Trump calling out the UK by name in a Financial Times interview is remarkable. The UK might be considered the number one ally, and when I asked for them to come, they didn't want to come. The UK is, under any reasonable assessment, the United States' closest military ally. The Five Eyes intelligence relationship, the nuclear submarine Trident program, the post-World War II cooperation that has defined Western security architecture. The UK was present in every major American military operation since Korea, Gulf War, Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Keir Starmer, the UK's current Prime Minister, publicly authorized the use of British bases for what he described as the specific and limited defensive purpose of destroying Iranian missiles. That is a contribution, not a warship, not a combat deployment, base access for a defensive purpose. And Trump in the Financial Times called that not coming. The UK's Ministry of Defense responded by saying it is discussing options with allies and partners. Discussing options. After Trump publicly said the UK didn't want to come, that exchange will be studied in British foreign policy circles for years. It is a public breach, by the American president, of the diplomatic convention that close allies work through disagreements privately. The British public will read Trump calling their country, by name, insufficiently committed to the American war effort in Iran. And Keir Starmer's government will have to navigate that domestically, while simultaneously responding to the alliance pressure Trump is applying. It is not an accident that Trump criticized the UK to the Financial Times specifically. The FT is the newspaper of the British and European financial establishment. A Financial Times interview is the venue you choose when you want the City of London, the European foreign policy community, and the British government to hear something clearly. Trump wanted London to hear what he said about the UK. They heard it. Let's look at what South Korea and Japan are facing from Trump's Hormuz demand. Because both countries are named in the hopefully list, and both have significant strategic considerations, South Korea's economy is highly dependent on Gulf oil imports. Its major industrial conglomerates, Samsung, Hyundai, POSCO, run on energy that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. South Korea also hosts American military forces and maintains one of the strongest U.S. security partnerships in Asia. Japan is in a similar position. The world's third largest economy runs on energy imports. Japan's energy security is directly threatened by a closed Strait of Hormuz. Japan also has constitutional restrictions on the deployment of military force overseas. Japan's self-defense forces can participate in international operations under specific legal frameworks, but the bar is high and politically sensitive. Trump asking Japan to send minesweepers to the Persian Gulf is asking Japan to navigate those constitutional and political constraints. In the context of a war that Japan did not initiate, did not endorse, and which has disrupted the energy supply that powers its economy. The Japanese government has not committed to sending ships, based on the reporting in these documents. South Korea similarly has not committed, and both are now being told by Trump that the future of the alliance depends on their response. Let's bring in the Goldman Sachs economic picture one final time, because it grounds all of this geopolitics in specific numbers. Goldman Sachs said the oil spike may trim global GDP by 0.3%, and push inflation higher, according to Investing.com's Day 16 report. Before the war, Goldman had predicted inflation would ease. Now Goldman projects the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure ends 2026 at 2.9%, above the 2% target, based on $98 per barrel average oil in March and April. If prices average $110 over those months, inflation hits 3.3%. Brent crude on day 16 is at $102.80. If it stays near that level, the Goldman projection for inflation sits between the two scenarios, closer to the $110 end than the $98 end. Goldman also said the Fed will not cut interest rates until September. That matters for mortgages, for business borrowing, for consumer debt. Every American with a variable rate loan is paying a price for the extended rate hold. Every business planning capital investment is calculating against a higher cost of borrowing. And the economic impact that Goldman is projecting is based on the oil price, not on the war itself ending, not on the strait reopening, based on the price staying elevated, which it will as long as commercial shipping in the strait is functionally stopped, which it will be until the naval coalition Trump is requesting actually forms. And the coalition will not form until China decides whether to send minesweepers. And China will not decide until it has processed Trump's Xi summit threat. And Trump will not have the summit until China answers. All of those things are connected in a chain that runs from $102 Brent crude through the closed Strait of Hormuz, through Trump's Financial Times interview, through the Besant-Leafing talks in Paris, through the Xi summit in late March, through the decision about Minesweepers and back to the price of a tank of gas in America. $3.68 per gallon, up 23% in 16 days. Because the chain that connects Trump's FT interview to the American pump price is real, and it is only resolved when the strand running through Beijing gets an answer, which Trump says he needs before the summit, which he may delay, depending on China's response to a request for Minesweepers for a strait that handles 20% of the world's oil. That was functioning normally 16 days ago. Before February 28th, day 16, the summit may be delayed. The NATO warning has been issued. The 5-minute clock on Kharg Island is public, and gold is at $5,016 per ounce, telling you what the market thinks about where this ends.